Extra Mile.
Today's show is brought to you by mpb.com, where you can buy, sell and trade used camera kit online safely, in the knowledge that you're buying quality used tested kit and properly graded kit, and you have a 6-month guarantee of your buying, which a lot of trading sites for camera gear do not simply have. And that's why I use them. That's why they are a really important sponsor of this program. My X100V, as you well know by now, because I've said it before, is it everyday carry or everyday camera? Did we ever get to the bottom of what EDC actually means? Or actually stands for. Anyway, my EDC is my X100V, my Fujifilm X100V. I take it on nearly all my adventures. Sometimes it's my X Pro 1 with my vintage lens, but often it's my X100V. I took it to Inverness for last year's retreat. It'll be going to this year's. And it'll be going to Africa, without a doubt. Don't worry, X100V. You're coming with me. Oh, thanks very much. You're my trusty sidekick. You really are. So go to mpb.com if you're in the US, Europe or the UK, and other regions now available. Then you can buy, trade and sell quality used camera kit and become a part of the circular economy. Also, today's show is brought to you by our Extra Milers. And that's what today's special is all about. It's a photo walk with a difference, because this is your chance to go behind the scenes or listen behind the scenes. Not necessarily go, but listen behind the scenes in a kind of way to the Extra Mile, to what the Extra Milers hear. I'm on holiday in Wales this week. In the rain, mostly. But I've been making some photographs, taking my photo walks, so I didn't want you to miss a photo walk this week, but I thought this was an opportunity, the first of two actually, because I'm taking one holiday in sunnier climes and one in typical British weather during the summer, it seems, this year anyway. And instead of having a week off as we did last year, I think we had 2 off last year, didn't we? Had two weeks in the summer off? Well, this year, no. This year I thought we'd do some specials for those who aren't Extra Milers, for those who don't belong to our Extra Mile community. So I've got a what, a why, a where, a when, a who to explain today's show. We'll start with a what. What, Neil? What is the Extra Mile? Well, the Extra Mile is a program that sits on the Patreon channel. It's been there for around about 2 years, maybe a touch longer, and it's been a few things actually, the extra edition that we have. It's been Access All Areas. It's been the More Show, which was sort of, it was definitely more studio-based. Diary stories, really, photographically. There's around about 100 of those, actually, on the Extra Mile channel. You can still listen back to them. Also, there were, was it one or two? I think there were two megasodes. And then more recently, it's become the Extra Mile. And there's almost 50 of those. Well, as you're listening to this, if you're listening on the day it was intended, there's nearly 50. And soon to be some videos as well. That's what resides on the Patreon channel. That's what the Extra Mile is. It's an extra walk with me each week atop the free photo walk that you hear of a Friday. Right, the why. Why? Why do you have a Patreon channel, Neil? Aren't podcasts supposed to be just simply free? Well, the Friday Photo Walk is free. It's on, well, I shall refer to it as the free stream. Jack Lowe, who was a guest of mine a good couple of years ago now, he said something. He's a photographer that's been touring the UK, making the most extraordinary wet collodion plate prints of lifeboat station crew, and it's been a project for him to get around the UK doing this. And of course, that costs money. So he had a Patreon channel, which I think he had some podcasts on. He certainly had lots and lots of posts that he was making about his journey around the UK. And he made a comment. He said, look, it may be free to listen to or read in his case, but it's not free to make. And I thought they were very apposite words, because having a Patreon channel, the Extra Mile as I call it, enables me to dedicate 2, 3, sometimes 4 days of my working week to making a unique style of photography podcast, because I think it's also a walking podcast, hence the title. And I think quite often a well-being one as well. There's 8, sometimes 9 hours of free material each month, and on top of that, the 4 hours of Extra Mile shows that are presented as well as retreats and a book that's forthcoming that sponsors this particular podcast. So that's the why. The where. These days, we're out on the trail, aren't we? It's become a walking show. It organically developed into that over the last couple of years, so it made sense that the Extra Mile also became a walking show. When? Well, it's Fridays now. It has been Mondays, the Extra Mile this is. It has been Wednesdays, and now it's Fridays. And it will serve as an addendum, I wasn't sure about that word to start with, to the free stream show that we have. You try saying that quickly. It's a tongue twister. And it gives me a chance to include extra parts of interviews where I can take a deeper dive with guests that I have on the show. Sometimes the interviews, often they're quite long, so I edit them down into shorter form. And I'm left thinking, there's a bit there where we talked about X, where it doesn't necessarily bolt into the flow of the Friday Photo Walk interview. But I tell you what, it's a piece all of its own. And that's what I have been occasionally putting into the Extra Mile, and what I will be doing far more of in the future. So those guests that you hear where you think, oh, they were fantastic, I'll have more chance to ask more questions and pop them in the Extra Mile as its own edition. Right, who? Extra Milers are featured as the Who often, mostly, in our Extra Mile editions, well, these days anyway. And they're an incredible community. If you're an Extra Miler, you already know that. But we have hobbyist photographers, we have walkers, we have trekkers, we have weekend landscape photographers, because that's the only time they can get out with their camera, escaping their 9 to 5 of the Pinstriped Express during the week. We have former conflict photographers, pet photographers, we have sports psychologists, I think we get the idea, Neil. I thought you would. And so they have become, our Extra Milers this is, very much the stars of the Extra Mile show. And that's been wonderful, because we've been learning about each other. It's fantastic to hear photographers who are famous, semi-famous, or otherwise in this wonderful thing we call photography, this great, wide, expanse of opportunities to talk about all manner of things, from landscape to street to portrait to whatever, but actually meeting what you might term, and I am one of these too, normal everyday folk who have, there's some incredible stories that we hear as I interview my Extra Milers. I think that's been an absolute privilege, an absolute joy. And so to have our Extra Milers atop the professional photographers who are in the main my Friday guests has been a fantastic and unexpected organic way to build the Extra Mile podcast. And so that's what today's Photo Walk edition is all about. You're going to gain access to the Patreon platform, which usually is for Extra Milers only who support the show. Today I'm going to play you, it's 9 bits, 9 pieces from the Extra Mile, which will include personal stories. There's a story about moving your life to another country, having faith in yourself, inspiration, imposter syndrome, which is something we touch upon quite often, but there's some thoughts on that. Stopping strangers and asking them for a photograph. We'll be going on a photo pilgrimage. There's some real light and shade in this episode you're about to hear today. And we'll end with just the most glorious and wonderful, and this is something that's organically developed as a line of questioning, really, a wonderful, wonderful, heartfelt why. And that's at the tail end of today's show. So this is a photo walk, but it's also your chance to join us all on the Extra Mile. And if you like what you hear toward the end of the show, I'll tell you how you can join us on the Extra Mile and become a part of this really wonderful, and I'm going to use the word again. Have I used it before? If I haven't, I'll use it for the first time. this safe community, because that's what this is. I think we support each other in a way that I don't see in many other communities and on many other podcasts. And of course I'm biased, but I'm very proud of my, let's just get through this gate, of my Extra Milers, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. By the magic of podcasting, I've teleported to a beach in West Wales in Pembrokeshire. I have no idea what this beach is. It's a reasonably private beach. There's, I'm guessing, 24 maybe people here. It's somewhere near Stackpole. And that's about all I can say, but it is a great place to come and do or read a few links that will link up today's special Friday Photo Walk Come Extra Mile. One of the things I can do with the Extra Mile is get, which I feel comfortable to do on the Extra Mile editions, is get rather personal. And the first two stories are a great example of that, really. I can take a deeper dive, as they say, into some of my guests' stories. And with the new autumn season approaching, we don't really have seasons, I know, but we do kind of work seasonally, I suppose, although it's ongoing, isn't it? Week after week. The weather changes on the show. That makes a difference sometimes to my grumpiness walking along the paths. But with the new autumn season approaching, that's what I'm going to do more of on the Extra Mile, as the Friday episode now really will have a natural addendum. My word, look at that. There's a rock just off the beach here, and the waves around it today are fierce. Let me get, it's a bit of a picture of the bay, really, but here we go. Shutter speed 2900, f3.2, 160 ISO. Nice angry clouds hanging in the background as well. There we go. Fabulous. So yes, I'll be taking some of the stories from guests on the Friday Photo Walk now further into the Extra Mile. And here's a moment shared with Erin Trieb, who's been photographing. She's a photojournalist, and she'd been photographing in particular when we recorded this episode in Ukraine. Anyway, we got to talking about a soldier that she'd befriended, and the conversation turned toward mental health. It's a conversation that took a darker twist, but also a moment where I shared my own very personal connection to a mental health story from my life and my family. So here's Erin from Extra Mile number 17, an episode we called Getting Personal.
All the military I've photographed, they've impacted me each in their own unique way. But this one kid who I loved to death and became like a brother, his name is Ali, and I ended up living with him. I followed him for well over a year. And I stayed with him in Reno, and that's when sort of the end of the rope began to fray, and I could see that he was, in real trouble. Mm. And let me see, it must have been a month later, he called me it was Valentine's Day. This was in 2010. And he had just cut his wrist and his arms badly and said that he was contemplating suicide. And at the time I was living in New York City, and I was commuting to upstate New York every week to work on this project. And it was about a 6-hour drive, but with blizzards and the terrible weather that upstate New York has, it could be an 8-hour, sometimes 9-hour drive. And I got up to his barracks room and walked in, and there was bloody paper towels all over the floor from where he had cut himself. And we talked that night till sunrise. I think we talked for about 12 hours, and until the end of that conversation, when I had convinced him to let me take him to the psychiatric hospital. And I didn't sneak my camera in, but I discreetly brought my camera into the mental health wing of the hospital and kept documenting his intake. Finally, they took him away. And in that moment, the whole idea of impartiality is totally bogus and bullshit. You can't be impartial.
Yeah.
You know, it was my attachment to him and my love for him as a human that, you know, got me to a place of where I was willing to do what I needed to do to make sure that he was okay. And watching him, you know, be taken away by the hospital, I knew he was in good care, but he you know, just that, I don't know how to describe it. It was like watching, even though he was just a few years younger than me, it felt like I was watching my kid, you know, if I had a kid being taken away from me. And I remember going to the hospital chapel and just wept. I mean, the hardest cry you can imagine having. And because I couldn't help him, you know, I mean, I had limited tools and resources. I just did what I thought was best, which was to take him to get professional help. And after that, he didn't talk to me for months. He was so angry.
Was he?
Yeah, he didn't. I don't know if he didn't understand that I was trying to help, or he was angry because he got essentially locked up and his cell phone taken away and he wasn't allowed to leave. And it was awful. But I knew if he wasn't committed, he could have easily taken his life. Long story short, he did get out of the hospital. He's doing great now.
Oh, that's good.
Lives up in Vermont. He's happy. But, you know, Adam was like the slow burn for me. It was like, he was like the flame that never went out in my soul. And whenever I thought about quitting that project, which there were a lot of times I thought about quitting, I just kept going because I just thought of Adam. And people like him.
You've I think mental health and watching somebody go, and I've got a story, and I'm not sure if it's even right for me to mention it after the story of Adam, to be fair, but I remember my mother going through psychosis and some very heavy mental health issues, and it fell to me, her son, to essentially sign the papers, as it were. And I do remember that moment myself. You've just reminded me very vividly of it, of waving her goodbye, and her being through this screen, and she was waving the other side, and I was thinking, my God, it feels like we're role reversed here. And it's a very difficult thing to watch somebody go into the mental health system, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and no, I mean the way you described it is exactly.
I wish I'd have had a camera, because I don't forget how that moment looked, but
right.
It's something I wish Is that a bit strange to want to have a photograph of that moment?
No, I don't think so. Because you don't want to forget. And did it feel, when you watched her go and the door closed, did it feel like you had lost like part of your limb had been severed? That's kind of how I felt, like something was taken out of me.
It felt like the person who looked after me all their life, suddenly in that one moment there was a click, and it was the other way around. And that's terrific closure on, and not necessarily welcome closure on, the relationship of a son and mother.
I'm so sorry you went through that.
That's I'm sorry I hijacked your story, but it just suddenly figured to me. I thought, my word, I've been through that myself. Very different, but I've been through that moment of looking through the glass.
And you didn't hijack it. I mean, I think, I love when people can relate to each other and share similar stories. So I appreciate you sharing that.
My conversation there with Erin Trieb. Well, we're starting this special edition of the Friday Photo Walk with, really quite personal stories. And I was a little worried this next story could be a touch self-indulgent. actually, but that's one of the advantages of the Extra Mile edition. I feel in a safe place, and my guests do as well, feel in a safe place to get or feel safe to get personal with their stories that they share. So in episode 26 of the Extra Mile, I went in search of my birth mum. Now, I was adopted in 1967, but days, perhaps weeks into my life, so I never knew my birth mum. And I'd been really intrigued to find out who she was as I approached the latter teens of my life. And my next door neighbour, Chris, helped me track down my birth mum, but it wasn't a happy ending story. There was no meeting my mum story, because my birth mum had passed away many years before I found out who she was. In 1987 she passed. Her name was Marlene. I had a few details about her, and with Chris's help, my next door neighbour, who's very much into ancestry, we managed to track down where she was buried. And I wanted to go and find Mum. In fact, I wanted to go and find her. It was just before lockdown where I'd intended to go, and then of course all travel became a lot less possible. Anyway, I wanted to see her grave, and it was a pilgrimage really, and I thought I'd make a photo story of it and take my extra milers with me. So over the next 10 minutes, there's some unexpected twists and turns in a graveyard near the windswept coast of Kent. I met a gravestone cleaner, which was very apposite, as you're about to find out. Oh, and you need to know my original birth name, which is Stephen Paul. They're my first two names, Stephen Paul. Anyway, this was an edition of the Extra Mile, number 26. There's more of it, but I want to play you just under 10 minutes, called Finding My Mum. Well, I found my way to St John's Cemetery in Margate. I've got a map in my hand that was provided to me to find the grave. It's some of the tombstones here, the graveyard, very austere feeling. It's very reminiscent of some of the large London graveyards I've been to, with many untended graves. I mean, some of these so old you can't even read the inscriptions. So up from the chapel, right, then there should be a path leading left, and then there's the Margate Hebrew Chapel next to the crematorium Garden of Rest. There are people over near where I'm going. I think it very, very unlikely that anybody will be at the graveside of the particular grave that I'm looking for. But if they are, I'm not sure it's appropriate, all right, that I should meet them. There's plenty of people walking about, so it's left here. Okay. I brought a plant with me, a potted plant, which I intend to leave by the grave. I obviously can't dig it in, although I bought a trowel for... I thought, I haven't got a clue what it's going to look like when I'm there and whether I'll be able to actually plant something. I find crows and rooks at graveyards quite sinister, quite disconcerting. Well, that's the Garden of Rest there. Chapel Avenue. So the avenues that you walk up and down the paths now have names. It wasn't supposed to rain this afternoon, but the rain has started to fall. I'm now in that position where I've got to the section. This is the section. There's a mini roundabout there. LV1, and that's it. What does the sign say? Rose Path. Well, this is the correct area, and there's hundreds and hundreds of graves. So now I'm going to use the more detailed plot map that I was given Let's have a look. Grave number 364. So there's the mini roundabout. Oh, hang on a moment. Okay, let's read the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not sure these numbers are right. 1, 2. The other side. 3, 4, 5, 9, 10. Well, this is the 11th. But that's not my mum's name. Michael John, somebody. Some of the gravestones have lost their text altogether, but I can't see that one in 1987 would have lost its text yet. It's likely to be a newish looking one. Violet, John, Maria. I think I've gone too far.
Oh yeah. Hey mate, right.
I'm assuming you will know more about this place than me.
I've got a rough idea. What's that? What are you looking for?
Well, I'm trying to find my mum, actually.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I look like I'm in the right place. That's a little mini roundabout.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know, I'm a bit confused
The numbering, yeah.
by the numbering. Because this looks like it should be 11 up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
What am I looking for?
203. Yeah.
That one hasn't got a name on it. Do you know what the name is on it?
Marlene, it should be Marlene.
Marlene.
Oh, this is it.
That's the one.
Oh my word. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome, yes.
Thank you. Well, it doesn't look like anybody's ever visited it.
No, it's in a little bit of a way, isn't it?
That's 1987, and look, it's already pretty damaged beyond belief, isn't it?
Well, it's not damaged. You'd be surprised. That will come up like a good example, like that white one there.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
How do they do that?
Well, we do it. It's just taking the polish off. So what you do is you take off the top surface.
Yeah.
And it reveals what's underneath. And what underneath is usually in good condition. You'd be very surprised because the older marble, what they used to import, was really, really good marble, and this is marble. So yeah, it's just a case of restoring it, and obviously the inscription, repainting it.
Difficult to read. So in loving memory of Marlene. That's right. It should be 1947. Yes, it is. 1987. Devoted mother to. Can't read that, and that's quite important.
Oh, there it says Alan. Is that Stephen? Yeah.
Well, Stephen's me.
There you go. Is it the first time you've been here and seen it, or is?
Yeah, my mum never knew me. She died before I had a chance to, and I've been meaning to come here for years. Oh my God. Well, one of these, I can't remember which one, died, so that means there's another brother. Good heavens. Well, I'm assuming that's me, because that was I'm not Stephen now. Is there a comma in here?
Most likely.
Does that look like?
It depends on the.
What does that look like to you?
Yeah, Alan, comma
Stephen, and Paul. Devoted mother.
Well,
wow.
If you want to read it a bit better, I can get you a little pad that will just take that grime off the front.
Would you mind?
No, enough of it now. Because that's what it is. It's just a layer of grime.
Oh wow! Look how that comes up. You can clearly see a comma in there, can't you?
Yeah.
I wonder those other boys, well, one of them's no longer here, but know that I'm here.
Your other brothers?
Well, Paul, Alan, there's Alan, Stephen. I'm sure that must be me, unless she called one of her other sons Stephen. My middle name was Paul. Oh, okay. So I wonder if I wonder if because I was adopted in 1967. Do you mind if I rub down a bit more?
No, go for it. You want to just keep it flat. It'll look like it's scratchy, but it's not.
Right. I'm really pleased I bumped into you.
just the right time,
It was.
Your inscription's fine. Whoever originally did that was obviously a good stonemason because he cut it nice and deep.
Yeah. And that would end up looking like that one.
You get it like that. As long as
Good Lord.
The only thing we can't guarantee is that there's not a stain underneath.
Right.
Because as you see down here where the birds have...
Yeah.
There could be a stain. It doesn't look like it to me.
Yeah.
But there's a possibility it could have a stain in it. But it'll come up like that.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So, what's your name?
Stephen.
Oh, you're Stephen as
I'm
well.
Stephen as well. So Steve Stephen.
Hi, Stephen. Meet Stephen.
Nice to meet you.
See you later.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
I'm glad you found it.
Thank you. Well, now I can read it. In loving memory of Marlene, 1947 to 1987, dear wife and devoted mother to Alan, Stephen and Paul. I didn't intend for this to be one of those YouTuber moments where it gets all emotional for the camera, and I'm not quite sure what I feel, except there was part of me that didn't want to find this grave with what turns out to be Stephen. I'll call him the grave cleaner. But then I'm pleased I did, because he had this little bit of sanding paper, and then maybe that was given in the stars. Stephen, meet Stephen. But I've never called myself Stephen before. And hello, Stephen. I'm Stephen. But yeah, look at that. Whew, I'm not quite sure. I mean, if whoever made this grave, now one of those brothers. Well, I'm confused slightly, because Alan, Stephen, Paul, there's 3 brothers. And I'm assuming that Stephen is me, unless she had another son and she decided to call him after me. That's always a possibility. Alan, Stephen, and Paul. If I'm one of those names on there, that really has knocked the wind out of my sails. I suppose that makes it ever sadder that I didn't contact her or get an opportunity, or was offered the opportunity to contact her. Although devoted mother too does suggest that Stephen is not me. That's maybe maybe her other Stephen. Oh, I don't know. Either Alan or Paul have passed away, and I should know which one, but I don't. I did, but I can't remember. So there is another brother, and that's either Alan or Paul. All right, let's put some flowers down. My flowers look a bit crumpled in the camera bag. I did bring a trowel to dig them into the ground, but has anybody else done that? Let me have a look. There's some bulbs that appear here and there. I don't think anybody else puts them in the ground, or do they? Is it the done thing? You shouldn't really dig at a graveyard, should you? No. I'll tell you what, I'll put my pot down here, just in the middle there. Will it fit in there? No, there was a pot holder next to her grave, but it doesn't fit in there. He looked a lot more sprightly when I left Newbury earlier on. There we go. Mum? Oof, right. Let me get a picture. It's a special edition of the Friday Photo Walk. The Friday Photo Walk and the Extra Mile, all wrapped into one. A behind-the-scenes listen to what we do on the Extra Mile. Now, last autumn, the fifth edition of the Extra Mile, I recorded a show in France whilst I was away shooting a wedding. It was in the south of France. And Craig Hughes, who's one of our very special Extra Milers, was second shooting for me. Now, he relocated to France. A roundabout journey from South Africa and England, and was rebooting his life, actually. Now, I think moving to another country is difficult enough, but actually having to reboot yourself professionally at the same time adds another layer of complexity. I recorded a 10-minute conversation on the morning of the wedding with Craig, and we shot the breeze about moving to another country, starting a business in a different country, and it was done for reasons you'll understand in hushed tones. It's the morning of the wedding. It's so quiet. Let me just hold my mic in the air. Is that you walking in your high heels, Neil? No, it's not. But that's one other person. Well, there's two other people here because Craig is one of them. We were talking yesterday about your move to make photography your career, and that's really what this Extra Mile is about today. I'm quite interested in somebody that's moved how many thousands of miles from South Africa to the middle of France, just below Paris in the mountains, who then decides to make photography, and in particular wedding photography, their career. I'm quite interested by that. Andrew Helmich has a program called PhotoBiz X, which is it's a very business-led podcast, and he always asks the question, and I'm being quiet, by the way, because I'm aware that there are people in the square who are probably still asleep in their windows, slightly open, slightly ajar. Yeah, Andrew Helmich, who asks the question of everybody, and he asked me when I was interviewed by him, if you were moving to another country, and I think he always says Australia, from far away, with nothing, how would you set up your business? What would be your first move? And I always think it's quite an interesting question, and it's sort of relevant to you because you're changing your life completely.
Yeah, complete change. I'm going to basically stop work, and then I started a little bit of setting up my company and getting my employment number, CIRE number here in France, insurance, and all those bits and pieces. Yeah. And it's not the easiest thing to do in a foreign language that I now speak, but I can't read properly.
Yeah, that's interesting because you speak French really well. I mean, to my ears, you speak it perfectly. But paperwork is a whole new issue.
Yes, paperwork is, and the French love paperwork. It's the bane of my life because I can't read it because it's written in high French, so it's all super hoity-toity French, and even the French struggle with it. Right. So me as a proper foreigner, not being able to really read French, it makes it nigh on impossible. I have to have a friend come with me and help me basically do the paperwork.
So going back to Andrew's question though, you've arrived in a new country. I know you've been here a while. Paperwork's obviously one thing, but what are you going to do to publicise yourself, to find customers?
I'm going to have to start scrounging around and talking to friends that have already got established businesses and ask them how they do it. Because for me, I don't understand the system here in France. It's not like the UK where we guys have got a lot of venues that you go to and you can become a photographer for the venues. We have venues, but they don't have in-house photographers or photographers.
So they don't have what we would call lists of those vendors that they suggest, because I'm not an in-house photographer for any of these venues that I'm a preferred supplier for. I'm simply a suggestion, a tick on a list.
Yeah, and it doesn't. Yeah, I don't think we have here. Really? I know we don't have here in France. Maybe in the bigger cities, possibly, but all the little venues that we go to here in my region of France, you just get known, and from that, just being known and being seen, I get work that way.
So being a vendor is probably not a choice then. So I'm thinking wedding planners, or one thing that we talked about last night was the fact that you are an English speaker. Yeah. So being able to have a command of French and English for couples coming across from the UK, and understand a lot of UK couples come to France. It's the romance of the whole thing. That could be an advantage, couldn't it? That perhaps you could advertise your services. Think about this the opposite way round. Advertise them in England to wedding planners who organise English people to come across to France.
Yeah, it's this wedding actually with you today is an eye-opener for me, hearing the amount of English that's spoken, the amount of English people that are here. It's the first time, because where I come from, there is very little English spoken or even English people. So to come here and see this side, it certainly gives me great hope for, like you were saying, to go and see the vendors in the UK.
What about competitors? What about pricing? What have you thought there? Have you studied the market? Have you seen what other people are doing? Are you about to enter the race to the bottom in terms of undercutting? Have you thought of that as a strategy? I know that some people will now be throwing their arms in the air saying that's a terrible business strategy, but it happens in the wedding industry when people are just establishing themselves. Of course, then you make a rod for your own back in that it's difficult to lift your price. But what's your strategy?
Well, that strategy that you've just explained is basically where I'm stuck at the moment. My pricing is way too cheap because of me trying to establish my business, and there are some cheap photographers around us, and their pricing for me is way too low. So I'm going to put up my price, 100% going to put up my pricing because I need to get value for money for me, as well as my clients, but I need to be able to live with photography. And if I keep the pricing that I have, I would have to do a lot of weddings and a lot of editing, and that for me is a bit of a bane to try and do loads and loads of weddings for no money. So I think this weekend's been a bit of an eye-opener where I can look at proper pricing and get a proper living from it.
What about second shooting? I know you're working for Michelle, who is an established wedding photographer here. Are there others that you could perhaps work with?
Yeah, I know the nice thing is we live in a small community and everybody knows everybody. So I know basically all the local photographers.
Yeah.
There are very, very few times that somebody comes to me and says they're an established photographer and I've never heard of them. And I've only been photographing for 5 years, and within that 5 years I could say I probably know 90%.
Well, what about other forms of photography, portraits, commercial, maybe studio product work? Are there other outlets that you think, I might investigate that as well? Or do you want to concentrate on one thing and get that right? I'm
going to basically, like you said, I'm going to look at all of it, photography-wise, portraits, lay flat. We have a lot of businesses, surprisingly, in the town. We have a lot of big industries.
Really?
Yeah, we have big cabling companies. We have a world-famous cabling company that is known throughout the world that is based in my town. Okay. We do specialist fire retardant cables, specialist environmental cabling. So have you started talking to those businesses yet, or is this too early? I haven't, because the owner of the company that I work for at the moment is part of the business, is part of the local area business association. So does he know your plans? He absolutely does, and actually backs me and has said to me that I need to facture him. I have to invoice him for the work that I have done for him in the past. Decent. Yeah. And it makes leaving actually the company even harder because he is such a nice guy. Maybe that's part of his strategy. Quite possibly. But through him I will get into the local businesses. Yeah. And it's something that interests me. I quite like a bit of architectural business photography. Yeah. I've quite enjoy it. I've taken some photos of machines and working machines. I've seen them, yeah. And you've shown them in our Zoom calls as well. Yeah, and I even my wife says I have a little bit of je ne sais quoi. What do you mean, even your wife? Well, that's an interesting last point, actually, as you head out on this adventure. Having support of those that you most love around you is really, really important. And I do know of photographers whose partners don't support them, who don't quite understand that they're moving, or they do understand that they're moving into an industry that isn't the most secure, but they don't necessarily support them. Yeah, I'm lucky. My wife is 100% behind me, and actually she's the one that has been pushing me over the last little bit where I've sort of been faltering because I'm a little bit wary of the uncertainty of work, and because we have family, I'm just wary that I'm going to take a salary away with the hope that another salary replaces it. So it's a hard one, but my wife has pushed me, and 31st of October is D-Day. Oh, is that the day? Yeah, D-Day, 31st of October. 31st? Yeah. We are only a month away. Exactly. And every day that ticks down, the pressure mounts. And it's mounting for me because the season for weddings has finished for me, and now I have to knuckle down and start building websites and talking to people and invoicing and doing everything.
So as we close this extra mile then, I'm going to ask you to suggest a date when your website will be finished, which seems there's an irony in me asking you that question since I've been working on mine for 2 years, but I do have one up in the air. It's just not the one I particularly want at the moment. But you need one. Yeah. One needs to be in the air for you to start pitching for your business. So what date should we put on it? End of November?
The same date as yours.
Craig Hughes sharing some thoughts about starting up a photography business. And, not simply starting a business afresh in your own country, which would be hard enough, but doing so in another country, having moved his family, his entire life, for reasons which you'll hear more about, actually, if you go back to Extra Mile number 5 to find out why he chose to move with the family. But I'm fascinated by stories of people that move to other countries to start a new life. And in Craig's case, yes, it requires learning the language, learning the French language, so that he can effectively start a new business with a capitalized E as well. So, Craig, thank you for your time walking with us on the Extra Mile. And also, it was a complete pleasure to meet one of our extra milers and work with him as second shooter. Although, really, Craig, it felt like you did as much work as me on the day. There's no such thing as second, shooting that wedding together in France. It was I'll remember that with great affection. I will. Right, here's a short excerpt from the Extra Mile. It's a part I clipped away after speaking to Nashville music photographer Madison Thorne. We talked about inspiration in the episode, and Madison shared, and I just saved this bit. It was on the cutting room floor, and I'm pleased I saved it because I played it within the Extra Mile, and we talked about the people we gain inspiration from.
I have had so many photographers that have been inspirational to me along my path. Ones from St. Louis that, pointed me in the right direction. Current ones that have been in Nashville for years and years, like Stacey Huckabee and Jim Harrington. And they are very well established, yet they are willing to speak to me and discuss photography and, give me tips. But upon thinking upon that question, I want to say my grandmother, because I remember at a very young age, not necessarily telling me how to take a picture, but why we compose a photo the way we do. I remember her telling me about the rule of thirds. And she didn't say the rule of thirds. She said, do you see the way this person sits on this side of the frame and how there's all this open space and you give them room to move within the frame? And I'll always treasure, those conversations with her.
I'm on the road to somewhere. As the song didn't quite go, I don't know where I am. I spend a lot of my photo walks saying, where on earth am I? If it weren't for the fact that I use my iPhone to record pretty much all episodes on, with a dead cat, a fluffy thing over the recording capsule so you don't hear the wind, then I'd be able to check on where I was and the trees around me and my interest in knowing what bird calls are. I'd be able to check all that on the phone. Neil, why don't you just buy yourself, if you like using the phone, why don't you buy yourself a used phone that nobody's using for calls anymore, and just use that as the recorder? That's a very good idea. Then I would have my usual phone to be able to use all those amazing apps on. See? Why didn't I think of that? Answers on a postcard, please. Right, we often talk on this show about making portraits of strangers. And it's a stretch, isn't it, for most of us. But I think engaging with the people that you meet before you ask, can I make your portrait, can I take your picture, hang on, just going through a gate, is a really important part of the whole process. I mean, if you storm in and just take their picture, then, you wouldn't do that if you were just trying to make polite conversation in a pub. Why do it when you've got a camera around your neck? So it's something that I think is a challenge. It's a real stretch, as I say, for many photographers. And here's a piece from a very early Extra Mile episode where, well, it wasn't really, it's certainly not a lesson in how to approach strangers. But I think it's interesting in terms of listening to somebody recording, i.e. me, what's about to happen when you walk to a stranger to go and make a portrait of them. I was intrigued by him because he was wearing a high-vis jacket, standing by a railroad crossing that I often use with Barney the dog when we're out on our walks. And he had a vintage recorder, cassette recorder with him. So instantly that piqued my curiosity, being interested in sound. And, I sidled up to him and decided to have a chat. And this is what happened. This way, Pops. Come on. I wondered who they were all hooting at.
Me?
It was you.
Oh, it's me, man.
A man with a microphone.
Yes.
I have a microphone, but you have a better microphone.
Oh, look at her.
Look. What are you recording? Just obviously train noises.
Well, I'm waiting on stone trains. I got one, went through. There's another one due up in about 10 minutes.
Why the stone trains?
Because they make plenty of noise.
They
I
do.
hear them during the fucking night. Yeah.
So why do you want to remind yourself of them?
Well, I've done it for years.
Have you?
Well, I used to work on the line, but
Do you have... I'm fascinated. Do you... this is a lovely old Marantz cassette recorder here. We used to use these at the BBC.
oh yes.
Yeah.
I've got 3 of them.
Wow, these are collector's items.
Yeah, 2 for spares,
Yeah,
and this one is functional.
the one.
Are you recording this?
Yes, I am. Is that all right?
That's fine, yeah.
I do a podcast for
I-
for photographers called The Photo Walk.
Done photography as well on the
Yeah.
railway.
Yeah.
Started off with a simple little Helena, then I ended up with a Canon.
Yeah.
But now I do the railways. I've done them for years because I used to work at British Airways and I recorded the aircraft as well.
Just the audio.
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 Yeah, I took photos, but
What is it about audio that was fascinating for you then?
Yeah, because with this machine I've got here, I don't know what you know about Marantz.
A little bit.
Yeah, but it's
I've done a few hours with one. Let's just say.
one of the quality analog recorders.
Yeah.
I use metal tape
Yes.
or CRO2.
Oh, metal cassette tape. Kids wouldn't know about
That's
that.
what in there
would
now.
they? Metal cassette, they'd say.
Metal cassettes.
To me, Grandad, what are you talking about?
Metal cassettes.
Yes.
And they're coming back.
Are they?
Oh yes, because they find that the frequency response
Yeah.
from a cassette is better than a CD
Ah.
because it's digital. It's
It's an analog thing, isn't it?
yes, it's
It's a bit like the using film versus digital. The
right,
sort of
yeah.
the dynamic range
Yeah.
of it is so much better sometimes.
Well, with digital recordings, you do sampling.
Yeah.
You sample a recording.
So why are you recording these then? What do you do with the recordings?
Well, I've had them for years.
Yeah.
I don't know. You don't know this man, but I've known him for years. A bloke called Alan Vitti.
Right.
Met him many years ago. I used to buy his tapes off him. It's strange, really, because I hadn't heard him for ages. And then I went on and I typed in Alan Vitti, and he'd passed away.
Oh.
So it worried me what had happened to all these tapes, because he used to do reel to reel.
Right.
Before this,
So that would have been Ewers,
Yeah.
little Ewer machines.
Yes,
Yeah.
he had those. He was one of your classic railway
Yeah.
recorders.
Yeah.
He didn't do video. He took photos, but he He did recordings.
He recorded audio. But what did he do with them, and what are you going to do with them? Are they kind of like an archive of sounds that otherwise might be forgotten?
Way back to the 60s.
Oh, you've got recordings back to the 60s.
Yes.
But what are you doing with them?
I've got them all stored, all
Yeah.
logged.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're all in cabinets and all typed up. So everything on my youngest daughter knows the value of them because they can go to some railway enthusiasts,
Yes.
railway society.
Yeah.
But this machine here, this is a classic, the Marantz.
Yeah.
And this one I bought because it's a 2-head machine. The other ones I got are 3 heads, so you can listen while you're recording. But the history of this machine is quite strange.
Go on.
Very strange.
I like strange.
This is very strange.
I'm ready. Are you ready for strange?
Yes. This recording
Yeah.
was used to do the paranormal.
No.
Yes.
But did it pick the paranormal up?
He never said.
Oh.
I said,
That's a rubbish end to the story.
I said, I hope you've not left poltergeists in here.
In the machine.
In the machine.
What's that song? The Police did it. Ghosts in the Machine.
Yeah, ghosts in the machine.
Ghosts in the Machine.
So this machine here is the one I like using.
Yeah.
And the other 2 I use for spares. If something breaks down in it, I'll strip it down and repair it.
See, there's obviously value in this machine, but value more so in the recordings. Can I didn't ask your name.
I'm George Rattray.
George, can I take your picture?
You can, certainly.
Put my notes down there.
I'm in the Newbury Weekly News from years ago as well.
Well, now you're on our show page. It's not the best. I want to turn. Can you go the other way round from me, just down there, because the light's falling on you in not a very
I wear this
flattering way. You wear your
2 reasons.
yeah.
One for security on the railway,
Yeah.
because drivers see me. And the other is because I'm on a bike.
Yeah.
People see me on the
So
bike.
Don't get knocked off. Right, stay here, pups. Right, sit. It's very
You need a
different.
haircut.
Well, me or the dog?
Like me? No, I do. I need a bloody haircut.
I tell you what, I don't need a.
State of this.
I don't need a haircut, George. Looking at me. Put your hand down there. There you go. Just a little portrait of George here. You never know who you're going to meet when you go out on a walk, do you?
I've met many people.
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
I've met from all countries.
Yeah.
All countries. I've met them here from, well, the other day I met somebody from Spain.
Yeah.
I've met Russians, Portuguese, Italians, Germans, English, of course.
It's the rich tapestry of life, isn't
And
it?
my wife is Dutch.
Oh, is she? What's her name?
Gerharde.
Have you ever heard of Hagel?
Hagel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a chocolate, isn't it?
There we go. I've met somebody at last that knows the breakfast. Hagel, yeah.
Yeah, little.
Yeah, the little sugary.
Little chocolate thingies.
They're the ones.
Oh, my daughter brings them over from
Does she?
Holland for her.
She practically grew up on them, I should think.
We all did. And we used to have it on crisp bread as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
And my thanks to George Rapley, who was recording the trains and interested in photography as well, as you heard. And they're the kind of things that happen on the Extra Mile, just those small, I think, segments where you experiment. That's what the Extra Mile is very good for. And I do tend to do that when I'm out recording those particular episodes. Let me say 2 words. Imposter syndrome. Andy Mumford is a guest, another relocating guest actually, keeping a theme with Craig Hughes' story earlier on. Andy Mumford relocated to Portugal many years ago. He became a landscape photographer. His workshops are, well, they're an extreme success. He takes photographers to many different locations in the world, making fantastic photographs himself and giving instruction along the route as well. On face value, really, he's the photographer living the dream. He's the embodiment of the word success. But under the surface, he's paddling furiously, worried that he shouldn't celebrate success because it could all go wrong. After all, who is he? What's special about his work? That sounds to me like a huge serving of imposter syndrome. And we talked about that only on The Extra Mile, a piece that I reserved really because I thought it was quite a personal piece from Andy. So here's a moment from An Extra Mile where I chatted with Andy Mumford about that subject that rears its head quite often on the programme.
I believe that art and doing something creative, I mean, even coming from where the background that I come from, I struggle to define myself as an artist because whenever I use that, I can hear my dad going, "Do a load of crap."
Yeah.
You're an artist. Do a proper day's
Get
work.
a proper job. Yeah, I can.
So I struggle with thinking of myself in that way. But I do think, the idea of creating, it is something that you can dig into really deeply in terms of the psychology and the philosophy of it. I'm fascinated by what makes a particular, we talk about composition, but why does harmony appeal to our senses? I think, if you look at music and you arrange it, and I've talked about this in videos, composition is the essential arrangement of elements, which is like arranging musical notes. And if you arrange those notes in a particular way, then you get a melody. If you arrange them the same notes in a different way, then you get discord. And it's the Morecambe and Wise sketch. I'm playing all the right notes, but not necessarily in order, which I love, and I would love to put that in a YouTube video, but I think there are copyright issues. But I think it's it's a fascinating thing, of why certain elements in a certain order are harmonious musically, visually. Why? What is that? Why is a particular shape appealing to us visually and another shape is less appealing? When you're doing landscape photographs, a mountain that has one shape, every photographer is looking and going, "Oh, that's a gorgeous mountain, I want to photograph that." The kind of flat, low mountain, no one wants to look at it. And I think these kind of things about the way our minds work fascinate me. The expectations that we bring with us when we go to photograph, and how that can affect how disappointed we are with or how happy we are with what we achieve, all the baggage that we bring with us, to the point where we don't even really see what's in front of us. We don't have the capacity to evaluate our own work because we're so weighed down with the idea of what we thought we were going to see. And the aspect of mental health, which I could go into great depth about it. I really struggled through COVID with anxiety and depression and just feeling that this was going away. And then there's the idea of imposter syndrome. Things are working really well now. I'm organizing workshops now and they're selling out. And I almost don't like saying it because it's like, you can't, because it's karma. It's bad karma to say it. It's all going to go wrong and people are just going to go, "Nah, that's a load of rubbish. I'm not doing a workshop with him. Who is he?" And that fear of failure. And I do all of these aspects of being creative and making a living from doing something creative. I think there's huge oceans of stuff to dive into there, I think.
Well, imposter syndrome is a fascinating and debilitating subject for so many people. We have a very good friend of ours who's a teacher, and he has taught at state schools for all of his life. And now he's at a private school, and he's found that imposter syndrome has bared its ugly self to him, because now he thinks, "Whoa, people are paying that much for this, and they want me."
I absolutely understand that exact feeling. It's not something that ever stops. It's something that you deal with.
But I think it can be a healthy thing, because it can be a healthy driver, because it does keep you on. Bill Ward a couple of weeks ago was talking about as an actor and a photographer. He was talking about the time he spent on Coronation Street, the 400 episodes or whatever, playing Charlie, the bad boy of Coronation Street. He recalled walking into the green room on the first day, an actor just being given this Coronation Street break, and looking around him thinking, "Oh my word, all the legends are here, and me."
I know exactly that feeling, and it is a driver. And I think as you get older, you learn to accept yourself and the way you are better.
Yes,
It's something that I know I'm going to live with, and I don't let it be debilitating or stop me from doing things anymore. Last year, so I'm a Fujifilm ambassador, and that again, God knows how that happened. It was just pure luck. they asked me to chair a round table at a festival in Portugal, and I really didn't think that there was going to be. I didn't think it was going to be that big a deal. And then when I looked at the people that were coming, it was done with National Geographic, and there were people filmmakers who I looked at what they were doing. There was a guy who'd won, I think, 2 World Press Awards for he worked on the migrant trail crossing the borders from Mexico into the US.
Wow.
Photographing the migrants and then working with them as they lived illegally in the US and photographing their lives and their community and had been part of their lives. There's another guy who was working for National Geographic, documenting illegal hunting of the big Tusker elephants. And I just sat with these guys thinking, God, these are proper serious photographers who do really serious, weighty things, and I take pretty pictures and it was that, I shouldn't be in the room with these people. But at the same time, meeting these kind of people is fascinating because it is inspiring, and you see so many people just doing incredible things, and I find that just really does inspire me. And you think, I'm going to push hard and do better.
I don't know whether you heard that in the background there. Plenty of bird life flying south, saying, come on, had enough of this rain. Let's fly south. We'll come back in October. I know we should have gone a couple of months ago, but somebody promised us sunshine here. Right, a moment ago, Andy Mumford. And my thanks to Andy for sharing some more personal thoughts about imposter syndrome and self-doubt. Right, back to the street. Niels Jorgensen spoke to us on the photo walk, a year ago, or maybe a little bit less. Here's something, though, you didn't hear on the show. He was sharing how he makes his celebrated street photographs. A bit of methodology, really, which I saved for the extra mile. Without doubt, Niels Jorgensen is one of the more gentle spirits of street photography.
Just finally, I was looking at your work on the screen earlier, and the chap on the Greek ferry asleep with his blue mask on that we've gotten so used to over the last couple of years, thanks to the thing that we don't like to mention. But also he has an eye mask, so he's got his mask over his nose and his mouth, and he's got a mask over his eyes. He's a picture of masks. You do have to be reasonably daring to be observational, not be afraid to lift the camera, not be afraid to be noticed. And in the short time that I've got to know you, it seems to me you go gently with everything you do with your photography. You're sharp, you're quick, I would imagine, at times to make pictures. But what happens when you're making pictures in terms of maybe if somebody sees you and they say, no, what are you doing?
You get different reactions from globally. You get different reactions in different parts even in England you get different reactions, but you have to, sometimes nothing will stop you taking a photograph. You just have to take that picture, and you then have to work out what you'll do if you're questioned. And I mean, if I'm questioned, I of course try and explain what it is, why I took the photograph, and to show them and try and explain that it was something I thought was beautiful or interesting or unusual. But yes, you can get a hostile reaction at times.
Do you delete if asked?
I don't think I've ever deleted anything. If I'm asked, I think I would. Yes, I don't want to upset anybody, so but it can also be upsetting for myself as well, because it's you don't want to upset anybody else, and you also, sometimes people are just very don't understand what the law is. You're allowed to photograph people, but it's best of all just to take a photograph without being seen. And often, if you're quick, you aren't seen. I think mostly people don't know they're being photographed. I think that's probably the best way forward.
Well, I'm interested in why you went from black and white, predominantly, pretty much all black and white photography, certainly for your street work, to colour.
Well, it was a big change from black and white to colour. Up until 2000 or thereabouts, I shot entirely in black and white, which is purely for a practical point of view, because as far as I'm concerned, you couldn't really shoot in the kind of conditions I wanted, like in a tube train. I mean, there are photographers who did, but I felt that it was you could get away with a lot more with black and white. But then digital came along, and I thought it was fantastic. You could shoot, you do the same things you did in black and white, but now in color. You really could. You get the color balance right, and you shoot in fluorescent lighting and all that sort of stuff, which has been a huge release, for street photographers today. They don't realize how lucky they are, even people with their phones, you can take a picture now anywhere, but in the old days you couldn't, in terms of technically speaking, it's such a fantastic liberation to be able to photograph.
Does that phone sometimes liberate you? Do some of the pictures ever appear out of your phone?
No, I haven't. I've got not a single one is from a phone.
Is that right?
Up until recently, I've always thought, well, I need to be able to make an A3 print that goes in a gallery.
Yeah.
That doesn't fall apart. Now, whether I haven't actually done testing recently, I've got the latest phones and so on. Maybe that would hold true now. You probably could get an A3 gallery print, and people wouldn't think, oh, it's a pity that wasn't shot on a slightly better quality or something. I mean, they look great on Instagram, but whether an A3 print in the gallery would hold up, I don't know. Maybe they probably would now.
Street photography is one of the favourite subjects, going by the polls that we've had in the past of who you'd like to hear on the programmes on the Friday Photo Walk. So it was a pleasure to talk with Nils about how he makes his street photography. There's a number of retreats coming up. There's 2 and a third one that I want to tell you about, but I can't just yet. Next year, in July, something is happening. You'll need to have strong walking boots for this particular one. It's a retreat that involves a fair amount of walking. However, I'll keep it quiet for the moment, because that news is to be released if the plans come together. They're looking good. Anyway, look, we've got Inverness coming up, and then we've got the start of 2024 in January, or towards the end of January, start of February. We are in the Gambia, which I'm thoroughly looking forward to. So retreats coming up. Now, if I rewind to 2022, Extra Mile number 3, so right near the start of when the show became called the Extra Mile for our patrons, I was travelling up to Inverness with Car to start the week, the retreat in Scotland, a drive that took me past a town called Lockerbie. It's, Lockerbie is a town and story that's indelibly marked in my mind, and these days for a myriad of reasons. I decided to stop at Lockerbie and record a few words for the Extra Mile community. It was one of those more personal moments that I felt safe sharing on the Extra Mile. Now, Tom Stoddart is a photojournalist. He sadly passed a year ago now, and dear Tom, he was one of those photojournalists that was so generous with his time for other photographers, for new photographers, and for me as I approached him, asking to make an interview with him a long time, in fact, before the Extra Mile show, before the Photo Walk show, before even Photography Daily and the Fujicast. There was a podcast that I launched called Breathe Pictures. It only made a few episodes, and then it really morphed into the other projects that I started working on in podcast sphere. And so Tom, I really had no track record when I approached Tom and asked to record a podcast interview with him. And he said, why don't you come up to Newcastle, spend some time in my house. We'll record an interview. It was in vision and in sound. And, I'll take you around my old stamping ground, show you some of the places that I photographed in when I was a young photographer trying to make it into the newspapers. That's how generous Tom Stoddart was. There was a reason I approached him. One of those reasons being a particular photograph. It's a bit grim, I'm afraid, a photograph in a newspaper that I saw of an aeroplane, or the nose cone of an aeroplane. It was the flight that was downed, as you'll hear more about in the story to come in a moment, over the skies of Lockerbie just before Christmas many years ago. And the paper that carried that story, the front page of that newspaper that landed on my parents' door had Tom Stoddart's photograph, and it's a photograph that haunted me, still haunts me. And I wanted to speak to the photographer who'd made that particular photograph. So there were some emotional connections to that photograph. So on the Extra Mile, I made a pilgrimage to find the position that Tom had made that picture from, because we'd spent quite a while talking about it when I went up to visit him. But before I play you those moments that I recorded in Lockerbie privately when I went up to the Inverness retreat last year and shared those words on the Extra Mile, let me play you just a few words that you may have heard from the original interview with Tom Stoddart.
You know, Lockerbie was a major event, and
But how does it affect your humanity?
well, it certainly makes you think twice when you get on a flight, and there are many things that you look at and you think, how could anyone do this? I mean, Lockerbie is one thing, that how could anyone callously plant a bomb on an aircraft and bring it tumbling out of the sky? My job, you know, on that evening, I was there quite quickly, because I happened to be in the north of England when it happened, and I got there quite quickly. You know, it's just purely a record. It's a very historic event, and needs to be documented, recorded for history. And you know, you do the best you can in what was a horrific scene.
A picture in my life that has left a lasting, is it legacy? Certainly a lasting effect, is the photograph that dear and the late Tom Stoddart made, that we talked about when I interviewed him. And I've come up to Inverness, or I'm on my way to Inverness as I'm recording these words, to go on the photo walk retreat. And on the route that I'm taking, just off the route, is the village of Lockerbie. And Lockerbie is the town associated with that dreadful bombing where Pan Am Flight 103 was downed by a Semtex that was being carried on board, unbeknownst, of course, to all the passengers and crew that lost their life in that flight. And the photograph that I remember from that time was of the nose cone that was lying on its side in a field. A photograph that Tom Stoddart made, and it's here on Tundergarth Hill where that terrible event, or that nose cone at least, landed. I mean, the aeroplane was spread across hundreds of square miles, but it's here where Tom made that picture, and he talks about being in a churchyard and photographing a cross. And I think I'm standing before the field where the nose cone was. It's very peaceful now. There's sheep in here as there would have been on that day and night. But then the church is just behind me. This is Tundergarth Church.
A Pan-American 747 jumbo jet with 258 people on board has crashed 15 miles north of the Scottish border. The plane took off from London's Heathrow Airport, bound for John F. Kennedy in New York at 6 o'clock this evening. Pan Am flight number 103 disappeared from radar screens 25 miles north of Carlisle. It went down near the town of Lockerbie in Dumfriesshire. The plane crashed into a petrol station close to a housing estate. Eyewitnesses say they saw a huge explosion and a 300-foot fireball. The emergency services are on the scene. There are no details of casualties yet. We'll bring you more details on News at 10.
It's a very, it's quite an overcast day today, so it's quite a bleak picture I've just made of the church, but I'm thinking this is where Tom would have been. I had this thought that he was photographing through the headstones, but no, he must have climbed a wall which surrounds the church to have looked across the field and over the wall that the perimeter around this field. this is the church inside. There's not really anything here that talks about the tragedy. There's no book of remembrance or anything. Not that I would necessarily expect there to be after all these years, but it doesn't appear to be. Here we go. There's one plaque. To the glory of God and in memory of the 270 lives lost in the air disaster, the 21st of the 12th, 1988. And that's it, that's the plaque.
All 273 people aboard a Pan American jumbo jet are now known to have died tonight when it crashed on the town of Lockerbie in the Scottish borders. People in the town have died too. It's thought at least a dozen, but bodies are still being found. The plane hit a petrol station and demolished 2 rows of houses, sending a fireball 300 feet into the air. The RAF Rescue Centre said a short while ago there were no survivors in the houses. It's Britain's worst air disaster.
I'm just wondering whether, actually, I was in the wrong part of the churchyard. Maybe this is the part that Tom was in, because there's headstones here with a very clear view through to a field. Again with sheep in it. Again it looks, I don't know, does this look any more likely to have been the final resting place of that nose cone? I mean, he definitely said to me, Tom definitely said that he was looking through headstones, because that was what he meant by this scene being made even more ghostly as he photographed in the morning mist as the sun came up. So maybe this is where Tom was. I think this is more likely. Definitely more likely. I'm going to put myself roughly where I think he may have been. The tombstones themselves all have... Now, I was told why they have this. Skulls, these very old tombstones here have skulls on them. They look very foreboding. Maybe that's what Tom felt. These are quite imposing tombstones. Some of them are 5 feet high, more than that. I'm 5'10" and a bit. These are easily my height. Wow. Yeah, it's just occurred to me that Tundergarth Hill is where that nose cone lay on its side. And I've been looking in entirely the wrong place. It was Tundergarth Hill. It's the very back of the church, not out the front of the church. It's the back of the hill through those really old, very old tombstones. That's exactly what Tom was talking about. There's now a rugby field in there, and somebody's built that's a new barn. But that's it. That's the hill. Wow. It's gloomy, I know, and a bit macabre. No, more than a bit macabre, I guess, to think, right, that's what I want to come and see. But, yeah, I'm pleased I have, because Tom spoke of that story to me, and that photograph in my youth growing up was a really impactful one. Yeah, strange. Tundergarth Hill. I don't know whether you can hear that, but overhead there's a jet. Just very faintly. And my thanks to Tom Stoddart. Dear Tom, much missed by all his colleagues, anybody really that came into contact with this exceptionally generous man, generous of spirit, generous technically, generous with his mentoring, just generous. And I remember my final interview that I did with him only a few months before his passing. at a time where I suspect he could have been doing other things. He was keen to talk about his latest book project that had just come out, but keen also to share some thoughts about getting into the industry. He's just a wonderful, wonderful man, and as I say, much missed. Goodness, Neil, whew, this has been a touch deep in places, hasn't it? Well, you know, that's this community all over. I think the Extra Mile, it's a safe place, I like to feel, to share all manner of stories and personal thoughts, personal feelings, personal journeys, as you heard earlier on when I went to search for my birth mum. So let's end with something very uplifting, I think. Recent from Kate Cunningham, actually. We'll talk about her why in a moment. I did say recently, if I had a podcast launching now that was nothing to do with photography, there'd be I'd be likely to call it something like the Kindness Project, although I've mentioned that to a few people, and they've said, "Oh no, it's been done before." So I'm not sure my enthusiasm quite flowed through to others. But also, and this is really only because organically a question developed, if you pardon the photographic pun, over the last year or so, asking people about their why. And it's something I'll continue doing because I don't think we've ever had anything that even resembled the same answer from two guests. So it's something that I shall continue doing. Hang on, another gate. Gate upon gate upon gate upon gate. There we go. And I think I might be beating those very dark, ominous clouds because I'm but half a mile from the cottage. I think I'll get back in time for a brew. No Garibaldi's. Oh, the local shop don't sell them. What? I know. But, sorry, yes, the Book of Why. That would also make a very good title for a podcast, I think. And I am working on a book for Christmas, which means really it should come out around about November. Now, I'm but 2 or 3 pages in, so I'm not quite sure yet whether I can say the book is coming out. But this is positive affirmation, isn't it? And when you say, I'm going to do something, you declare it, a declaration. Affirmation, declaration, affirmation. I feel a song coming on. So, it's going to be a project which features the whys that have been shared by guests of all kinds, with photographs from the photo walks, the somethings and nothings that I've made with some of the stories that go alongside them. Anyway, let me share with you in a moment Kate Cunningham's why. If you've enjoyed what you've heard during this programme of Extra Mile Moments, then I'd love you to join our community. It's very much a way to support the podcast as it grows, and I want it to grow in all sorts of different ways, visually, audibly with different projects that I'm planning, more pop-up Zooms, perhaps more Zoom shows in the month, Zoom live shows in the month. But I can only do that really with your kind support. There's 2 ways to support the show, I suppose. No, it's probably more than that, but 2 main ways. One is to share the show in your social media channels and amongst your friends and photographers that you know. That's precious too. The other way is to support it through our Patreon, which now you know is called The Extra Mile. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard, then go to the website, photowalk.show, and you'll see an orange button that says support the show, and you can join us there. Right, come on, Kate, share your why, and I'll be back with the photo walk next week.
I'm going to draw to a close with asking you a question that I think you can answer. I don't think everybody can answer this question, but I think you can. Here's pressure on you, Kate.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you, and I think you know the question that's coming up. I'm going to ask you what you believe your why is. And I think it's going to be an artistic direction that you're going to take this, or photographic.
Oh, my why. I thought about that. Thank you. My why comes into play. That question actually comes to my mind every time I'm behind the camera. When I'm taking a photo of someone who says, I've never had a good photo taken of me, I feel ugly, I'm unattractive, and I say, trust me, because I see you. And that's my why, is to give that gift, to capture the birds, to capture the flowers, to capture the animals, that moment. My why is to celebrate the fact that it exists, and that to celebrate the fact that I was there in that moment to capture it, and then to share it and hopefully get other people to be as excited by it or to actually feel what I felt at that moment. And there were some posts recently on the Facebook page where I actually responded and told them, I can feel it. I literally can feel what that person was looking at. There was one, I think yesterday, where he did a walk and he took pictures, and there was a harbor and it was kind of dark and there were some colors, but then there was poles with tiny lights on the top. And I saw the reflection of the tiny lights in the water, and I felt like I could feel it. And I got the why of why that person stood there at that moment. And I think maybe pervasively as photographers, we all have that big why that we pick up that camera and press that shutter button for.
Usually I would like music now to be coming up underneath you and ending beautifully and poetically at that moment. But I have to draw back to 6 words that you said about a minute and a half ago. Trust me because I see you. There's 6 words, isn't it? Yeah, that's 6 words. Trust me because I see you. What a wonderful thing to be able to say to somebody whose photograph or whose portrait you are making.
And it's, I think it's a gift to me in that moment when I run across that person also, because when I'm looking through the lens, I feel like I want to connect to how they want to see themselves. And I mentor young photographers, and I tell them, always try to connect through that lens and listen, have that conversation, find out why they feel the way they do. And then you're only going to shoot to promote how they feel. Never be the one to put out the photos just because you say, click, 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 this is your event. What you're looking for is that moment for that person. Because when they look at you and they look at that photo and they look back at you, and sometimes they cry and they go, that's me. You got me. And to me, that is worth millions. That's just, that's my why.
The Extra Mile.